Hello, my name is Neil Linscheid with University of Minnesota Extension. I'm here with this short video to talk about the Cold Spring market area profile that we did in 2020. What I'd like to do is provide a quick overview of the project and share just a little bit about what you'll find on this site and what you'll find in the report that's also listed on this site. A market area profile is used as a way for communities to better understand the retail market of their community, in this case, Cold Spring. To do that, we use a variety of secondary data sources like the U.S. Census and other tools from the U.S. Department of Commerce. We hope that this will assist efforts to develop local retail and service sectors and groups like economic development authorities, chambers of commerce, in our case, the Cold Spring EDA. And what we like to do, and what we think is really critical to the whole process, is including and involving local experts in a group that we call the Retail Study Committee. On the third page of the report, you'll see all the people that participated in this and helped us with it. So let me just give you a quick overview of the methods that we used to undertake this research. The first thing we did was we formed a small retail study committee, and I met with them, and we discussed where the study area should be. What is our trade area is what we called it. Then we created a business list based on that trade area. So we went through and tried to understand how many businesses were in each category. The lists we have are often inaccurate. They come from someplace else. So it's always best to really take time to review the list with people that know the community and provide input on places that had closed or maybe are duplicates or maybe they've recently opened. The committee also was asked to review the report and review some of the findings that we've had along the way. So after we engaged with this retail study committee, then we gathered the data, my colleague and I, Ryan Pesch at the university. We gathered the data using a tool called ESRI, Business Analyst, and also some tools that you'll find links to in this website from our Downtown Market Analysis Toolkit, namely the Retail Gap Calculator. Now I'll just go through each of these pieces in a little bit more detail so you can understand what we're talking about in the report and it can be more useful to you. So as I said, the first thing we did together was we set a trade area. And this was done by the members of the Retail Study Committee, all taking out maps and me asking the question, how far would people come on the coldest day in winter to shop in Cold Spring? And this gave us this dark outline where we said, it seems like people probably wouldn't come past Rockville when they could get so close to St. Cloud. And after Paynesville to the east on Highway 23, people probably would just go to Willmar if they wanted to do some shopping. But surely people from Paynesville, Richmond, Rockville, Eden Valley, Watkins, Kimball, and some of the townships to the north, south, east, and west, surely they would come to Cold Spring on days to shop, and maybe customers would go back and forth between the communities in this area. So this seemed to be a reasonable way that we could set our trade area. And in fact, we asked several businesses to provide us with zip codes of their customers when they had them. And the local library also provided zip codes of just where people were, no names or anything attached, just the counts by each zip code. And that matched really relatively well with this trade area that you see here. The green dots within the trade area are all businesses that are within this area. So we use this trade area to gather information about how many people live within that dark boundary, and also to understand what their incomes were per capita, as well as gather any other information we could about spending patterns. Again, from the ESRI, Business Analyst Database. We were also lucky enough to get some information from the Minnesota Department of Revenue. In this case was just for the city of Cold Spring, not that larger trade area, this information gave us an understanding of what the taxable sales for retail and service sector were, as well as the gross sales. Gross sales, they change really rapidly, and there's a few footnotes in the report for that. I won't go into it here, but for many reasons, we like to focus on taxable retail sales. And it looked as if things had been stable in Cold Spring for a number of years, with maybe some slight growth. We could also use that data to calculate something called a pull factor, which is really just a way to compare Cold Spring's sales per capita with the state of Minnesota sales per capita by each retail category. And if the pull factor is a 1, that means that the state sales per capita and Cold Spring sales per capita are the same. If it's a number below 1 as a pull factor, then, for instance, in retail trade, we have a pull factor of 0.9 on the far right column. That means that the sales per capita in Cold Spring were less than the state sales per capita. Now, when it's over 1, that means that a community is generating more sales per capita in that category than the state average would predict. So that generally means that people are pulling in consumers from outside of their area. So in this case, what we saw was that in the retail category, Cold Spring was losing a little bit of sales to elsewhere, but in general was just slightly below the state per capita average with a pull factor of 0.9. On the accommodations and food service area, almost to a 1 with a pull factor of 0.95. And then on other services, it was slightly below the state per capita sales. So overall, that bottom line was that for retail, pull factor of 0.91 means that maybe about 9% of the sales we might expect if everyone spent like the state average does in the retail category, about 9% maybe are going someplace else. Now we know that's not exactly true, that people are coming and going all the time, but it does give us a rough estimate of how well a community is doing at retaining their spending that's available or gaining new people coming in. Now there's quite a lot that you could spend your time learning about if you wanted to, related to trade area analysis and gap analysis. So I did include this link here, and on the website that you're watching this video on, there's other information so you can dig in and maybe even conduct some of your own analysis and learn something on your own related to this. But in this case, I did want to point your attention to, in the report, we use something called a trade area gap analysis calculator. It's quite a mouthful, but it's really a Excel spreadsheet that you can download, and you can find the instructions on how to use at this website. And we use this to help us sort through some of the information that we found from all the different data sources we had. I'm going to just take a second and pause and pull that up, and then talk for a moment or two about what that might mean. So as I said, I would pull up this trade area gap analysis, or this gap calculator, that we put together for Cold Spring. And I just want to take a moment to talk about how this thing works, give you a quick idea. What we did is we loaded in some assumptions, that's that box down in the bottom here, about the trade area population. We had a good guess, around 24,000 people. We had some information about the per capita income in that trade area, and we had information about the U.S. per capita income. So that provides us with some important details that come from a survey called the U.S. Economic Census. And this U.S. Economic Census provides us information about the average sales per U.S. store of every retail category. We also get some information on the per capita sales across the country for each category. And then we can use that information to ask what would be the potential sales for that trade area. Again, that trade area is that map with the dark border that we worked with the Retail Study Committee to produce. So in this case, we'll just focus on the first line, because this, once you learn how to do that, then you'll be able to look at all the other lines that are of most interest to you. So the first row or line in this chart says NAICS, North American Industrial Code System 44111, just the code. And what we really care about is that represents new car dealers. Per capita sales in the United States, with the last time the U.S. Economic Census was conducted, was 2,142. Average sales per U.S. store was about 31 million, maybe 32 million, somewhere in between there. Potential sales in the trade area, $49 million, 579,462. Really what we care about is that when we looked at the business list, we could find out how many stores would that amount of sales demand based on the average sales per store. So we're saying how many sales would be potentially in the trade area, and then how many sales on average does a U.S. new car dealer produce. That would give us the demand of 1.6, about 1.6 stores. And when we went through and looked at the list of businesses within that trade area, we saw we had 4. So what that's telling us is that there's a gap in, there's more supply of new car dealers and than there is what the demand would tell us. There's a lot of reasons that could happen. One could be that they're just really great new car dealers in the area, and they're very successful, and they pull people from all over the place. Another reason could be that it's very competitive, and some of those new car dealers aren't selling up to the average per U.S. store. But there's a lot of reasons that it could be. We don't know which one for sure. What we do know is that the market size maybe only would only predict that 1.6 new car dealers would be there in that market, and we have more than that. So this same sort of process is what's playing out for every one of the categories that we have in this gap calculator. Now, when you look at the gap calculator that we have online and on this website, you'll see that you can change the assumptions. You could add more stores, and you'll see how these estimates of business demand and supply change by saying maybe we have the count wrong and there's 5 stores instead of 4. You could absolutely do that, and I encourage you to take a look at that and help yourself understand what all this means. You'll also notice that in the report, there's a retail gap estimates by store format, and this just provides that same information but now in a chart format, so you can see that it seems like there may be some opportunities for restaurants, clothing stores, photographic services, accommodations, these sorts of things in that trade area that we estimated. And then that as the graph goes to the left, that's places where there may already be a strong supply of stores, and people should think carefully before starting a new one. Now, the thing that I think is really critical when we're looking at information like this is to take a moment and say, does this really fit with the real world and with the world that I know? And what are the reasons that maybe, although the data says there's some demand for eating and drinking places, that maybe that demand is difficult to capitalize on. It's difficult to capture that. And not take this as your only data point for deciding if a business would work if you're interested in starting one. So as I said, you can take some time to look at the gap calculator, and you can look at the information that is found on the sites and additional resources to learn more about how that works and learn more about how you might modify it to ask questions on your own. I just want to draw your attention to a few things that we mentioned at the end of the report in our recommendations section, and just give you a brief moment to think about those. We saw that there might be some opportunities to expand offerings in the clothing, accommodations, and restaurant categories, mostly driven by that gap calculator, which showed that there was strong demand for more stores. We also saw that it might be an opportunity to coordinate efforts among existing businesses to address the barriers for those interested in shopping locally. This is primarily driven by that pull factor that was less than 1, showing that people might be going elsewhere to make their purchases, and that the per capita sales for any of the categories and across categories could be higher based on what we would guess would happen from state averages. I also wanted to end just by addressing the situation that's been happening here in the United States for the past month. It's right now early April, and we've all been in the middle of this COVID-19 situation, and we've had retail businesses been forced to close due to this situation. Hopefully that's temporary, but we really don't know how long this will happen or what the ramifications will be for the long term. We do know that people are hurting in their businesses, and that consumers are hopefully interested in shopping local and realizing how important it is to have local retailers and service businesses in their community. So I just thought I'd mention a few things on how we might use the data that's been gathered here and the work that's been done here to support what we hope will be a speedy and robust recovery. One idea is that you could use this data to help you understand the spending patterns in the local area. So the spending patterns in Cold Spring give you some estimate of the size of the local market for each category. Again, looking at those, the total potential spending that's happening, or thinking about the state averages per capita is a good idea and can help understand what's possible and what sort of local market there might be. If you're trying to start a business right now, that would seem to be a pretty valuable thing to understand. On the more negative side, it can give us a rough estimate of the direct impact of business closure during the shutdown. Again, we can make a guess looking at the per capita, or looking at the sales numbers from the Department of Revenue about retail spending. From the best numbers were from 2017, and hopefully those newer numbers will be released soon, most likely 2018 numbers. That can help us understand how much money was being lost during the shutdown period and in which categories. This information can also be shared with entrepreneurs that want to start a new business and would like to know more about how much average spending is happening in the category that they're most interested in. And we hope that more people will want to start businesses after this time and that they see some opportunities in their community. Indeed, you might find that there are people that, even though the situation hasn't greatly improved, are wanting to start businesses right now and are seeing opportunities out there. So we definitely hope that people will take advantage of those opportunities, and we are absolutely here to answer questions through the Cold Spring EDA, through the University of Minnesota Extension, and through all the partners that have been involved in this project to help make people successful in their business ventures. Well, I just want to thank you for listening into this video. I hope it's been helpful. I hope it's been useful for you in learning about this project. And hopefully, as you open up the report and look at some of the resources, it's answered some of those questions that you might have had. Hope that if you have further questions, you feel comfortable sending me an email, or of course, your first stop, as always, are great partners and the people that sponsored this project with the Cold Spring Economic Development Authority, or anyone on the Retail Study Committee. And I'm sure that any one of us would be happy to help you understand what we're doing, understand the limitations, and understanding the possibilities of what this information could be used for. Thank you.